Welcome today to good friend, long-standing business professional associate Luvendra Naidu from Startek. Luvendra is also one of us who's grown up in the industry, starting out as a call center agent and today as the VP Business Development for Startek here in South Africa. So Luvendra, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And I'd really like a bit of an overview on Startek. If you could give our viewers just an idea of the scale, the scope of operations here in South Africa, the global operations, and then we'll move then into the lockdown.
Fantastic. And good morning to everyone. And Rod, thank you so much for the opportunity to share, a little bit of what Startek has done, pre-lockdown, post-lockdown from a COVID perspective. But I think, talking to the initial benefit, who is Startek? And if we start looking at who is Startek, Startek's a global organization listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We have 47,000 BPO professionals around the world, across 63 delivery centers, servicing multiple languages. And I think, when we start to get why is Startek different from, some of the other BPOs, I think Startek takes a very strong view in terms of partnering with our clients. And we've seen that now with the lockdown, pre-lockdown and post-lockdown, what value that partnership has brought to the fore in support of Startek, specifically when I start looking from a Startek South Africa perspective, what support we've received from clients to enable work from home for the agents that support the campaigns.
So the scale of operations here in South Africa, what sort of agent numbers are we talking about on the on-premises operation?
So on-premise, we've got two sites in South Africa, the one being in Sunninghill, Johannesburg, and one being in Durban. There's a split across from an agent perspective. We've got approximately 1,400 agents, which are split across two sites. From an active DR perspective, that's the one, I think. And then we've also have a number of individuals that work on client sites from a co-source model, where the clients invested in infrastructure. So across the entire real estate from a Startek South Africa perspective, we have 1,400 agents and we have approximately 300 support staff that support them across, the QA, training, the human capital benefits, IT support, and so on.
Okay, now, obviously you would have had a DR plan in place before the lockdown came into effect. No doubt that was throw the book out the window and start all over again. Can you share with us where your executive team position was pre-lockdown in that week or 10 days before that?
So I think being a global organization, I think we started to see the impact on other geographies where Startek operates. So I think from a Startek South Africa perspective, we already had plans in place and started planning for lockdown, seeing what's happening from a global perspective in some of the other markets that we operate in. So I think from a leadership perspective, that trigger was, it was triggered way before even the soft lockdown, the official lockdown, where we started planning around how would we enable work from home, what it would mean for our business. And 100% correct, the DR plans that we had in place didn't cater significantly for work from home solutions. So, that was, it became obsolete in this scenario.
Right, then came the announcement of lockdown, and no doubt a mad scurry to implement now the work from home or the remote agents. Can you describe how that week or 10 days impacted the operation?
Rod, I'd love to say that it was, we were totally prepared. I think in as much as, we had got feeds from the various different geos in terms of what was happening. And why do I say that? I think that, we didn't expect, the lockdown to be as severe as what it was in South Africa, to be honest with you, just looking at the numbers. But I think the pre-planning that we did actually prepared us for different scenarios. We had to have, what is our plan A, our plan B, and our plan C, and kind of understand, each eventuality around that. I think the thing that actually saved us, and I use the word saved, quite lightly, because I think it's more than just being saved, is the fact that, communication between the Startek leadership team across, the different, and if you look at it from when we look from a global perspective, our leaders sit in different geographies. So communication was absolutely critical. And it's not just communication at a senior executive level, but we had to cascade those messages down to the leadership team, your managers, your team leaders, and ultimately to the contact center agents and the support staff in terms of, how our world is going to change due to COVID-19.
Yeah. And so how long did it take to transition your agents to the remote or work from until you became fully operational again?
So we actually did that in a phased approach, and we looked at doing it in a phased approach because I think, one of the big constraints that we had, and I think, and just looking at the industry as well, is from a connectivity perspective. Mm. And when I look at connectivity, it's not just enabling the individuals to have the various, Wi-Fi devices to actually work from home, but it's also the connectivity that came back into our centers. A lot of our clients have their infrastructure sitting in secure data centers within our premises. So, we've had to also up the bandwidth in terms of, from a client perspective and a Startek perspective, knowing now that you're going to have a lot more traffic that actually is traveling over the infrastructure that we have. So, I think, from there, I think, a lot of the providers that we deal with actually came to the party. Given that we manage one of the large telcos in South Africa, they also came to the party in terms of, routers for the staff to enable work from home. And when I say we did it in the phased approach, we had a kind of 48 hours, let's deploy, let's understand what, are the individuals able to work? And if they're able to work, let's deploy the next level of it, because when you look at the scale of our operations and the number of people that we've had on a work from home, you can't just deploy, 150 odd work from home without, kind of doing it in a phased process and understanding, what some of the challenges are by rolling out 20 or 30 at a time. So it was absolutely, a phased approach. That's the one. I think the second thing that also assisted us to a certain extent was the fact that, we regarded as essential services. So we were allowed to have individuals on premise, but we didn't rest on our laurels to say, given that we're essential services, let's just make sure it's business as usual. We are still transitioning as of, 2.5 weeks into the lockdown, still transitioning staff into work from home to ensure that, we support, the social distancing, make sure we take care of our staff first and foremost, and have them in a secure environment where they're not accessing or they're not using public transport. They're not being exposed to, any environments where they could actually pick up the virus.
Right. Now, assuming that you've moved a good percentage of your operators into a work from home environment, how are you finding the performance of those agents from a management point of view?
So, Rod, I think, firstly, I think, we go through quite a rigorous recruitment and acquisition process from an agent perspective. And when we recruit individuals, I think, like many other organizations, one of our core values is trust. Excuse me. And when we start looking at from a trust component, we had to trust that the individuals that we had sitting on our actual physical on-premise, are able to, and that trust will permeate and carry through on a work from home perspective. Right. I think that was a big one for us. So, we had to trust in that. Did every single agent actually perform at the desired level? No. I think there is an adjustment period like with anything. But by and large, managing performance at that level, I think, the contact center environment by its very nature is virtual. When you're dealing with offshore, you're dealing with any client out there, it's by its very nature, it's virtual. And there's a trust relationship to say that, these are the KPIs or the SLAs or the outputs, more so. There's trust that is going to be delivered. So what we did find in kind of the first two cohorts that were in a work from home, we did experience some challenges from a performance perspective and understanding as well. Not every one of us has got a study or a quiet area that we can work in first and foremost. It is very difficult. I think, we also had to keep the morale up with staff because from a coverage perspective, working on 3G in their various different areas where they live, in some instances, the coverage was very poor. So, you've got to keep up their levels of motivation that they're sitting at home. They want to work.
Point. In fact, is there anything specific that your organization is doing to maintain that motivation, that that passion for excellence, that spirit of teamwork to a remote agent sitting, as you said, in maybe not ideal environments.
So Rod, what I think one of the big things that one of the lessons that we learned is rather communicate. I think, individuals, in as much as, yes, they're working from home, there's still a risk and there's still anxiety about, what is going to happen with COVID. Can I get the virus if I go to the shop and the rest of it? So we've had a number of educational campaigns that we've communicated to individuals out there. And in some instances, and this is not just guys that are working from home. Yes, we have a portion of individuals that are not regarded as essential services.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, use of technology, WhatsApp has proved to be exceptionally effective because we can transmit those messages to individuals. It's real time. No one's actually having to check their mail. I think as a leadership team, we've stood together. We've communicated with one voice, and the biggest message and the strongest message we've sent out there is we care about you, we care about your families, we care about the communities in which we operate in. And even though you're working from home, stay safe. I think, that care and concern has really stood us in good stead. We found that, individuals that work from home, the performance in some instances has outperformed when they were actually on premise. I think they now understand.
Number of operators that they're experiencing that, yeah, very good.
Yeah. So, they understand the responsibility, excuse me, not just in terms of the South African economy, I mean, as a BPO operator,
mm-hmm.
but also how do I take care of my family, make sure that I can still earn an income, have sufficient for the basic essentials, and so on. I think the other amazing thing we did, each one of our sites, we've got pre-testing before as you enter the boom gates, you have to stop at a nursing station. Your temperature is checked, and we ask a number of questions around travel and so on. And have you been exposed to someone that may have had COVID-19? So we do that first check. If the individual does not pass that initial screening at the gate, at the boom gates, we also have on-site clinics which are staffed by medical doctors. The individual is then escorted to the medical doctor. The medical doctor performs additional kind of tests and questions and the rest.
Mm-hmm.
If he is comfortable that the individual could be just the flu and the individual sick, we will then send that individual home. We're not going to have them in the environment because they're more susceptible, being in that, because the immune system is, yes. If the individual and the doctor, in his professional opinion, the individual should be tested. Immediately that individual is taken to a testing station. We pay for the tests, and the individual is sent home. We make sure the individual gets back home safely. And we've also, I think as an organization, we opened up both our sites to residents in and around where our sites are based to actually come for the pre-screening and the testing as well. So I think, when we look at staff motivation, people look at, are you just looking out from a commercial perspective, or are you there for the community as well? And I think we displayed that absolutely exceptionally, during the crisis.
Very pleased to hear that. That's laudable. Now, extremely difficult for any of us to look into the crystal ball and see the future. But assuming that this lockdown is phased out, and that in the not too distant future, hopefully, the COVID-19 is something of the past. How do you see our industry as a whole rolling forward? I'm quite sure none of us believe that we're going to go backwards into what used to be normal. But let's try and paint a picture, and I'd be interested in your views of the contact center, BPO, global business services environment, or the sector post-COVID. What are your views on that?
So I think it's, we absolutely in for a new way of work. There's no two things about it. I think, this has been a wake-up call for every one of us across the different industries.
Mm-hmm.
I actually see that, I think, and it's not just from an industry perspective, but I think from a Startek perspective as well. Work from home is going to be the new Startek going into the future.
Right.
Specifically where you can actually enable work from home. There's environments that we operate that are PCI, that need to be PCI compliant as we deal with customers, confidential information and card information. Those are more difficult to actually enable from a work from home. But if you look at your kind of your tier 1 and tier 2 queries, be it customer services or be it technical help desk queries, there's absolutely no constraints for the individual to actually work from home. I think, some of our, absolutely our recruitment methodology needs to change. I think the way we reward people and the way we interact with people will absolutely need to change. I think as human beings, we are social. So, at some point we want to interact with colleagues. So we have to look at, is it something where the individual comes in 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or every fortnight, so that you still have interaction.
Hybrid model.
Absolutely. It's going to be a hybrid model. There's no two ways about it. So I think, I think as well, sorry, Rod, I think as well, clients, our clients that sit from an offshore perspective absolutely realize that right now as well. And I think, with the 2-week lockdown that we've had, the performance of the individuals, the fact that we've been able to mitigate risk from that perspective, I think clients are also partnering us and we're holding hands and saying, this is how we need to take this forward, and we can grow the industry.
Interesting. Then also during this period of the last 2 to 3 weeks, information sharing across competitors in some instances I've been seeing, the National Association, BPESA, how important has that been to assist your organization in transitioning into this new world?
Rod, I think, there's, I've kind of praised BPESA and, the Harambee guys as well, extensively, purely because I think if they did not support us as an industry, I think, there would have been a bloodbath in terms of, job losses in South Africa, specifically from an offshore perspective. I think they've really come to the party. They've given, freely in terms of time. I know there was calls, in the middle of the night and so on. I think it's not just about that. I think the relationship that they have formed with government and the relevant structures is absolutely solid. I think that the fact that we've had, directives issued for our industry in terms of what is deemed essential services and so on, for us to continue operating and servicing some of our offshore clients and even domestic clients as well, I think is absolutely phenomenal. I think, in the time of crisis, for us to get the airtime with the relevant ministries, they've done a phenomenal job. They've shown their credibility as industry, as being ambassadors for the industry, if for lack of a better word. I think they've done an absolutely phenomenal job. When you start looking at competitors, it's unprecedented, the collaboration that has been going on between competitors, and not just via the BPESA National Forum. I mean, I think, I've shared with individuals as well, saying, if you've got a challenge with this, I'm absolutely available to talk about it. Here's my contact details. So it hasn't been just via the formal channels. It's also been one-on-one with various different competitors.
The network.
And absolutely. And I think, we're all here for one goal, Rod. I think, when you start looking at South Africa from BPO sector, it supports, we've created, this massive job creation that has come out of it. And we're there to save the South African BPS sector, the BPO sector. Yes, we all have our commercial entities to run, but ultimately, we do this for brand South Africa.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that. Luvendra, we're going to wrap up in a few moments now. Any messages to the industry that you'd like to share just before we close?
I think, I think, the biggest shout out for me, and I hope, some of the contact center agents out there actually watching this, I think, they're giving their time. We've had individuals make arrangements to have their PCs taken home where, we couldn't arrange, kind of transport in time and so on. I think where we are right now could not have been achieved without the agents. Yes, we've got strong leaders in the rest, but without a willing, agent population, I think we'd be dead in the water. So it's a shout out, and it's an absolute thank you to the agent population out there. I think also, absolutely the various different government structures have supported the industry body. People like yourself that's also, getting the message out there in terms of how vibrant and how solid and supportive the South African BPO industry is from a global perspective. So it's an absolute shout out to, all the other partners that's been involved. And, finally, I think, proud to say that I'm part of Startek. I think we've done exceptionally well. I think, when I start looking at our people, I think they look at the Startek brand with pride right now in the manner in which we handle it, the lockdown and the work from home solutions.
Excellent. Well, Luvendra Naidu, thank you so much for your time you spent with us today, and wishing you and Startek and all of the people all the very best as we go through the next phase of the lockdown. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure, Rod. And to everyone watching this out there, stay safe. there's various guidelines around social distancing and making sure that, you limit your exposure to the, the coronavirus, this pandemic that we experience. So stay safe. We will all get through this, in a couple of months. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you very much.